They're about checks and balances on the concentration of power.
And two constitutional amendments will be on the August 13 primary, both addressing how federal dollars are spent.
It shouldn't be that our Constitution is changed by a very small number of voters.
This week, we talked to coalitions on both sides of the issue and a political expert to take a deeper look into what's at stake for the August primary. Thank you for joining us. I'm Darielle Fair. With less than 100 days to the November election, both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump have been busy on the campaign trail. In what has now become one of the most unpredictable election seasons in history, President Joe Biden's decision to end his bid for the White House has upended the trajectory of the presidential race. But while a potential Harris-Trump matchup still remains close, national polling suggests Vice President Harris could potentially have more than one path to victory. A poll released by Axios last Thursday shows Vice President Harris having more support among voters 18 to 34 years old, with Harris leading Trump 60 to 40%, a 7% increase from President Joe Biden when he was still in the race. The poll was within the margin of error. Joining me now is Quentin James from the Collective PAC. Quentin, thank you so much for being on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Quentin, how critical will it be for the Harris campaign to engage young voters this election?
It's going to be critical. We know that young people have the power to be the deciding factor in this election. Young people kind of get the tagline sometimes of not kind of showing up to vote all the time. But we know their issues are really important and will be on the ballot this cycle, whether it be climate change or the ability for women to control their bodies. Those kind of conversations will be really important and I think will be motivating factors for young people. But they definitely will have a huge part to play in deciding whoever will win this election. And I think right now, Vice President Harris is kind of leading amongst young people, but a lot of work to do over the course of these next few weeks.
And to your point, national polling is showing that Harris is leading with young voters, but this is a group we did see Biden struggling with prior to ending his bid for the White House. How will Harris need to define herself on the issues young people care about to garner support from this critical voting bloc?
Yeah, well, the great thing is that Vice President Harris has been working and talking to young people, whether it be around student loan reform or visiting colleges on her college tour that she did as vice president. She's kind of been speaking to the issues of young people for the past few years, but even before that, even as U.S. Senator, even as Attorney General, fighting against colleges that were for profit and kind of taking advantage of students. And so she has a long track record of being a candidate fighting for issues that young people care about. We just got to make sure more folks know about her bio and about that work. But I think she's been doing a good job and she will continue to do so over the next few weeks.
More than 100,000 people registered to vote last week. 85% of those were people between the ages of 18 and 34. Why do you think we are seeing young voters choose not to register under a specific party? And will that be a challenge for the Harris campaign?
I don't think it'll be a challenge as long as we do our job of making sure that folks know about her record and the choice that's in front of them. This is a very clear choice between two different types of futures. One where we choose freedom, and the other one where we kind of go back to the past. And I think young people will really be focused on supporting a candidate who cares about the future, which will be Vice President Harris. But what I can say is that her candidacy has inspired tens of thousands, if not millions of people to get involved in this process, whether it be donors for the first time giving or folks signing up to volunteer for the first time. That momentum that we're seeing in rising registration rates, increased donation rates, that's really because of her historic candidacy and the work that she's done, again, as vice president, as a U.S. senator, and as attorney general in California. And so I think her bio, her record really speaks to the concerns of young people. And we think that we're going to show up and vote for her in November as well.
I want to focus now on Black voters that are between the ages of 18 and 34. An issue for some of these voters that plays into their likability for Vice President Harris is her role as a prosecutor and her policies on crime. But we now see the Vice President leaning more into that role in recent weeks. How is the campaign shifting the stigma around those perceptions ahead of November?
Yeah, well, one of the first things we have to do is really get the truth out there and set the record straight. There's a lot of rumors online that as prosecutor or as attorney general, she sent black men to prison for marijuana. That's not true. Only 45 individuals in the entire state of California, the largest state in this country, were sent to prison for selling or use of marijuana in her entire term as attorney general. And so even out of those, we don't have the racial breakdown to know how many of them were African American, but only 45 out of tens of millions of people in that state. And so we got to set the record straight. And look to her record, right? I think people need to know she was the first attorney general in the United States to require body cameras for officers in the state. She fought for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act as a U.S. senator. And the Biden-Harris team has done a lot on this issue as well through executive action because Congress hasn't really addressed the issue the way that we think it should. And so she has a great track record on this issue of being one of the first really progressive prosecutors in this country. And I think once folks really hear the truth and understand her record, they'll understand that a lot of that stuff, again, is trying to really divide our community.
Quentin James, president and founder of the Collective PAC. Quentin, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.